Hello, everyone. For the very first time, I'm creating a video series using graphics and music. I have no experience in doing this, but I do have experience of providing information to people about systems of oppression. And so I decided to try this from a digital format, and I'm part of it is because of COVID. To be able to have my lectures for students that are unable to make it on campus to attend the lectures. So I decided to do this. So I'm playing around with a program, and over the summer, I'll work around and try to play around with it a little bit. Hopefully, I'll get more experience as time goes. I'm thinking about hiring a producer soon to help me out with the editing and stuff because I'm not really a tech savvy person. Uh, a few weeks ago on Facebook, particularly a page called P Vegas, which is for the community of Platteville, Wisconsin. I offered my knowledge and expertise to some of the issues pertaining to the massive and now global rebellion that began as a result of the murder of George Floyd at the hands of the Minneapolis Police Department. That brutal example of the oppressive state and the results of the rebellions across the nation that spread across the entire world, actually. Um, After a few weeks, I wanted to collect questions and comments from people who were curious about what and why we see such racial tension. Uh, there's been some political activism in Platteville. Some people have been attending rallies, protests, marches. And so I want to give people more information to use to have, in a way, ammunition to address these type of issues. So I asked people to post questions, and I did get some, but not nearly as much of what's occurring in most Facebook discussions, particularly in the P Vegas discussions. This was kind of a sad thing for me, but Facebook spread so much bile and bitterness, and there were numerous posts of people just spewing all types of vile things. This is the frustrating part of social media and the internet in general. Too many people don't want to know information. They just want to spew their prejudices. So what I'm going to do is use questions from some folks and also questions that my students have asked over the years on the issues of systemic rebellions, systemic problems that led to these acts of rebellion. I think I was able to accurately and clearly answer their questions, so I thought I would share with other folks. So if you like it, please share with your friends and family, and hopefully you can have some really profound discussions with each other. Please note, I will make this material as family friendly as possible, but some content may not be suitable for young viewers just because we are talking about some things that are very triggering. I highly recommend you watch first before you allow your children to watch, but I also highly recommend you allow your children to watch. So the first topic that I will cover is Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter. It's crazy how three words have caused so much emotional responses and controversy in our nation. For the past 8 years, since the inception of Black Lives Matter, politicians, celebrities, athletes, and just about everyone have given support to or condemned Black Lives Matter. Some for their own political gain, others for social clout. Conservative media and pundits compare Black Lives Matter to the Taliban, even wanting them to be labeled a hate group. Over the past few weeks, the national attitude of Black Lives Matter has shifted, with a recent Pew report showing more favorability than ever about the movement. We see across the country people of all racial groups marching, protesting with chants of Black Lives Matter, even in small town Platteville, Wisconsin, with only 11,000 people. and 2.5% black population. We see this occur. Even the Amish were waving Black Lives Matter signs in solidarity. We see it being co-opted by corporations as well. Amazon, Netflix, JP Morgan, Nike, and others have jumped on the woke bandwagon because they see profit. Side note, Amazon fired black employee Christian Smalls, who organized a walkout over unsafe conditions caused by COVID-19. One of Amazon's lawyers called Mr. Smalls unsmart or articulate. Articulate is a term often associated with black people being seen as intelligent and so-called well-spoken. It's offensive in the eyes of many black folks. With these corporations, it's so much easier to have a statement in support of a movement, easier to show how woke they are than to actually make lives better for their employees, many of whom are black. Amazon is a $1 trillion business, and Jeff Bezos, the richest man in the world, the CEO of Amazon, has a total worth of over $130 billion. He makes $9 million per hour. The average wage for Amazon employees, 25% of those are black, is around $15 an hour. But one thing is for sure, as more people are wearing Black Lives Matter shirts, putting bumper stickers on their cars and signs in their yards, I'm going to assume most people don't know anything about the Black Lives Matter movement, because it's easy to yell it and say you support it, but it's difficult to understand it and do the real work that they are trying to do. So I want to explain to you what it is. Black Lives Matter started out as a hashtag on social media in 2012 by Alicia Garza, Opal Tometi, and Patrisse Cullors. After the death of Trayvon Martin, they created this hashtag. Trayvon Martin was 17 when he was walking through a Florida neighborhood, coming back from a convenience store, and confronted by George Zimmerman, who shot and killed Trayvon. Zimmerman was a wannabe tough guy with the neighborhood watch and was told by police not to confront Trayvon. He then got into an altercation with Trayvon, who proceeded to mollywop Zimmerman. Zimmerman then pulls his gun out and murders Trayvon. What happened after was that Zimmerman wasn't charged until much later. He was acquitted later on due to the stand your ground law in Florida. But the despicable thing is that Trayvon Martin was on trial just as much as George Zimmerman and blamed for his own murder. The media, especially conservative media, brought up that he got in trouble in school, that he had marijuana in his system, that he posted inappropriate things on social media, and the real kicker, that he wore a hoodie. And that becomes justification. That becomes rationalization for his own death. They blame the victim. In class, I asked my students to think about how many people they know, how many family and friends do they have that have been in trouble in school, that have used or are using drugs, that post or have posted inappropriate things on social media, or how many people have simply wore a hoodie. And overwhelmingly, all the students raised their hands. And I asked them then, should those things be used to incriminate them if they are the victims of a homicide, that they are the victims? And so people use that information to attack them and rationalize and justify their murders? None raised their hand. They all understand. Then why Trayvon Martin? This is the same thing with Ahmaud Arbery, as we somehow see him deserved to be chased down the street and killed like an animal. What's been said about him? He's jogging, but somehow he wasn't jogging. He's doing something else. He's in a house. Now, even Ben Shapiro, who is a racist, homophobe, transphobe, he even said himself that it's ridiculous. And he's even gone inside construction sites and looked around, and nothing ever happened. And he understands that Ahmaud Arbery was an innocent victim of being chased down by vigilantes who saw him only as a black man and thought that his life did not matter. There are numerous situations like this involving black folks who are often blamed for their own killings. It's somehow their fault. And no one is ever convicted for these murders. In another video, I'll discuss the very minimal number of police and vigilantes that are prosecuted and convicted. Most of these folks get away with murder. This is why Black Lives Matter moved from a hashtag to a new civil rights movement. They have actual chapters all over the country and around the world. Some of their goals, all right, so I want to list some of their goals, but their primary goal is to address state-sanctioned violence perpetrated against black individuals and communities. And what I mean by state-sanctioned, we mean that there's no accountability by the government, all right? So if a typical civilian kills another civilian, then that becomes accountability because they're prosecuted, they're oftentimes convicted with evidence and investigations. Even when there's overwhelming amounts of evidence against the police and vigilantes, they are oftentimes still released. And there's been a history of this regarding how black victims, there's no justice for them. And we'll talk about that later on in another video. All right, so I'll give you an example with George Zimmerman. So George Zimmerman was acquitted, all right, but he was the one who confronted Trayvon Martin. He's the one who instigated the attack, the issue first, and then Trayvon Martin defended himself. But how the law was played out and how the media portrayed it as George Zimmerman was defending himself because Trayvon was somehow this violent perpetrator. The men who murdered Ahmaud Arbery, they weren't charged until months after his killing. All right. And they never would have been charged without the video of Ahmaud Arbery's murder being made public. So the outrage comes after we nationally see the video of Arbery being hunted down the street, being chased, and being murdered. Then that's when the investigation comes. All right. Before that, they tried to hide it. They didn't do anything. They were pretty much just sitting on their hands. This relates to the deaths of so many other blacks, such as Amadou Diallo, Philando Castile, Freddie Gray, Eric Gardner, Michael Brown, Akai Gurley, Tamir Rice, Stephon Clark, Botham Jean, Adetanya Jefferson, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Sandra Bland, and most recently, Rayshard Brooks, all killed by the hands of the police. Black Lives Matter activists are trying to enact change against violence by the police, as this disproportionately impacts black and brown communities. They are also against vigilantes like George Zimmerman. They want justice for black LGBTQ communities. They want criminal justice reform, and they stand against human trafficking. And while they focus primarily on black communities, they also fight against police brutality in all communities. If you want more information, go to blacklivesmatter.com and you can read their statements, read their issues, and you can support them. Now, as a result of Black Lives Matter, there comes a reaction known as All Lives Matter, which is not an organization. There's no leadership. There's nothing. All Lives Matter as any type of movement does not exist. Let me say this again. All Lives Matter as a movement does not exist. So what is All Lives Matter? All Lives Matter is simply a reaction to Black Lives Matter because too many people have this idea that Black Lives Matter excludes everyone else. That is not Black Lives Matter intention. That is not what they do. But because of the term black is involved in there, somehow they feel that it's exclusionary. Too many white people feel left out. That's simply it. That's the reason why people say all lives matter, because they feel somehow they're exclusionary, which Black Lives Matter does not do, just bringing awareness to the plight of Black communities and Black Americans. It's a reaction to somehow thinking that Black Lives Matter is only talking about Black lives, which is the opposite of what is being addressed. And they are trying to quiet the issues that Black people are trying to bring to light. When I hear all lives matter, I have this feeling that what they are really saying is all white lives matter. So I really want white Americans to ask themselves, what about Black Lives Matter makes you uncomfortable? What are you afraid of when you hear that saying? And what do you really mean by saying all lives matter? Here is an example of why all lives matter is non-existent. In 2015, 19-year-old Zachary Hammond wanted to sell a bag of weed in South Carolina. He didn't know the person he was selling to was an undercover cop. This minor marijuana sting wound up fatal as Zachary Hammond tried to drive away and was killed by a uniformed police officer. I don't believe that for 1 second. Zachary Hammond was trying to escape getting busted for a stupid bag of weed. You can see for yourself inconsistencies in the reports, as well as medical examinations. But who made this murder nationally recognized? Black Lives Matter activists. You know who said nothing? All Lives Matter's non-existent advocates. The murder of Zachary Hammond shows that All Lives Matter is only there to drown out the valid outrage that Black Lives Matter activists have. That's it. Conservatives and racist whites have it out for Black Lives Matter and try to attack them for anything, whether they are responsible or not. Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, Bill O'Reilly, and right-wingers spread lies of outrage to their flock daily about Black Lives Matter. Just the other day, Tucker Carlson said we should fear Black Lives Matter as they flood the streets with angry young people who break things and they hurt anyone who get in the way. These people make millions invoking white fear to their audience. Here's 2 examples of them weaponizing attacks against Black Lives Matter. In 2016, activists marched and chanted, "Pigs in a blanket, fry 'em like bacon." Conservatives associated that with promoting killing cops. Now, I could care less about this because I've called cops pigs multiple times. That doesn't make me some cop killer. I even used to bump NWA's F the Police and Ice-T's Cop Killer when I was younger. Young, angry people say stupid stuff sometimes, but there shouldn't be any conspiracy that they are about to kill the police. This brings us to 2016 in Dallas, Texas, where a black mass shooter murdered 5 officers and injuring 9 more. But the problem is the narrative of Black Lives Matter being a cop-hating institution and those childish pigs in a blanket chants, along with this shooting taking place during a actual Black Lives Matter march. All the pieces fit the conspiracy theory puzzle that this guy was a Black Lives Matter operative and therefore Black Lives Matter were to blame for these murders. This was an evil act and the man was a coward. The killer was nowhere affiliated with Black Lives Matter and was a man who wanted to express his hate by just killing police officers. And blaming Black Lives Matter for this was only done to create hatred of the movement. Under the Trump administration, Black Lives Matter and other black activists have been under investigation by the FBI, labeling them black separatist extremists or black identity extremists. At the same time, white nationalists have committed the most acts of terror since 9/11. But conservatives focus on Antifa and Black Lives Matter. We can see similar incidents taking place in the past. In the 1950s, 60s, and early 70s, there was a covert operation taking place against U.S. citizens called the Counterintelligence Program, or COINTELPRO. The United States government, with J. Edgar Hoover running point, spied on, tapped the phones, and sabotaged movements in the United States. The FBI waged war on Americans labeled radical and used brutal tactics to dismantle Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, the American Indian Movement, the Black Panther Party, and dozens of individuals and organizations were under attack by the United States government. The Panthers were infiltrated by the feds, who tried to cause violence from within and also create conflicts between the police and the Panthers. So when we see Black Lives Matter and other black activists being investigated for extremism, there is a historical connection to vilifying these groups. Black Lives Matter is now trendy and looked at as something people want to gravitate to. While it is great that Black Lives Matter is getting awareness, people know little about it, thinking it's only a chant or a slogan on their clothing. Black Lives Matter is a global movement that calls for racial justice and for people to be treated with dignity and recognized as human beings. Yes, all lives do matter. But if you think that black lives have been treated the same as whites in this country, you really have a false impression of this nation. My name is Dr. Frank King, and I will work on creating more videos addressing systems of oppression. Thank you for watching, and I'm asking that you like and subscribe and share this with your friends and family. Peace.